Yeah, I think we'll, get started. Thanks, everyone. Okay, everyone, if you want to sort of come closer, grab a seat, gather around. Ed, this here, yeah? Both of these are on, or this one here? Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, take it out or leave it on a stand for people to come to. I don't know what's easier. If we take it out.
Well, you have your lavalier.
I have my lavalier, so I don't need. I did, yeah.
Okay, then you could just, leave this here for people to come up.
People can come up, or we can have a runner with a microphone, whatever's easiest. If you want, yeah. Thank you. Great. Feel free to get up and get more cake or coffee or whatever, obviously, whenever you want to. We have a microphone here as well that people can come ask questions or discussion, or if it's easier and someone wants to volunteer to be a runner with the mic around, we can do it that way. So I don't mind what people do. So these parish meetings monthly are, just a time for us to go deeper into our life together, to communicate well with one another, and stay up to date with all that's happening in our parish, have input for the life of our parish and for the direction and vision that we're headed. And so sometimes focusing on particular aspects of our ministries or of that life together. And so we, back in October, started these and focused on stewardship because it was the stewardship month, the month we were focusing on that. And though all of our life is about being good stewards of God's graces, so it's not just a one-month thing, but we focused on that in October. Last month, we just did a bit of open visioning about our identity and who we are and how we see ourselves as a parish and what that means for us. And this month, coming up on a year now, since the first family arrived with us. This is being recorded, so we will not use last names, okay, everyone, when you speak, of the families who are here. That's really important, and we can talk about why. So, but the first family arrived on the 13th of December last year. We had in our formation hour, I remember that week, we were doing an Advent series of different Advent themes, and that week was hospitality. And we talked about what it means to be an open, welcoming, inclusive, hospitable parish. It doesn't just mean that we all create an atmosphere where we feel warm and fuzzy inside, especially those of us who look the same and talk the same or come from the same sort of backgrounds, and we have a nice country club feel where we feel, warm or something when we come in the doors. But actually, that in the New Testament, the word used for hospitality, xenophilia, is, in other words, the opposite of xenophobia. It's love of stranger. It's love of stranger. And to welcome in the name of Jesus Christ in the gospel is to have a love of stranger, of those who are seen as other, those who are made vulnerable in our society. And in this particular circumstance, those who are, literal strangers coming because they've been forcibly displaced from their homes and everything had been taken from them in Afghanistan. So in 2021, people, I'm sure, remember in August 2021, a massive evacuation of about 85,000 people, and there's been more since through other countries, neighboring countries like Pakistan and others, from 85,000 people from Afghanistan in a number of hours. You'll remember bombings and explosions in the airport, all kinds of chaos, hundreds of thousands of people trying to be evacuated as the U.S. government, our government, was putting Afghan allies, people who had worked with the U.S. government and the U.S. military for years in Afghanistan, onto a plane to get them out. That many people arriving in the country at once, that many people arriving who have been, of course, forcibly displaced, who have become refugees because of us, like when we're a direct cause of this, right? Coming at once was a bit of absolute chaos here as well. For something we were radically unprepared for. The previous administration had cut all funding for refugee resettlement in the nation. Most refugee resettlement agencies were either closed or completely understaffed, under-resourced, and underfunded. And then this happened, right? With nothing, and there's no real parallel for the way that this happened, other than possibly post-Vietnam War in the nation. So there was a bit of a crisis, and the International Institute of New England, who we're working with, often called IINE, there are plenty of other refugee resettlement agencies as well, Catholic Charities, Centria, which started as Lutheran Family Services or Lutheran Refugee something, but now called Centria, works in our area as well. The family who lives in Newburyport, was sponsored by West Newbury Congregational Church, came through Centria. The other 4 families in Newburyport came through the International Institute of New England, which is a regional refugee resettlement agency. But they advertised last fall the need for, the desperate need for temporary housing, as finding over 2,000 were coming into the state of Massachusetts all at once, and finding housing for that many people literally within days or weeks of each other, arriving in the state was impossible. And then on top of that, some of these families are very large, right? So we have here with us at St. Paul's a family of 9 and a family that was 10 when they arrived, and of course now 11. And then at First Religious Society, Unitarian Universalist, another family of 11. The family sponsored by the West Newbury Congregationalist Church, family of 7, right? And then we have another family of 4 in Newburyport. These large families, obviously, their housing for them doesn't really exist, right? And so we'll get to that, what we're looking at doing for that. So they needed temporary housing, which under normal circumstances, so the normal stream of people coming in, normal size families or whatever, 2 to 3 months of, sort of temporary housing while they find something permanent. But it's only just now to this point a year on where hotels are being emptied still, of people living in hotels for months on end. So the housing crisis that already is in existence in the state and throughout the nation is even a greater crisis when it comes to these newcomers, these refugees. So seeing the advertisement, got in touch with them and said, we had this Sunday school space we couldn't use, during COVID. It's just empty rooms, that we could provide that space. So in September, we started talking about it as a parish, and every month the vestry meeting, and just sort of generally thinking that, we'd like to help in any way we can. We've offered this space, but didn't hear anything back for a few months from IINE. And so we had actually formed, Lisa is the vestry shepherd for global outreach, and so we had formed a group of people who was going to be a volunteer group with IINE to help set up homes, other places, or do things, do air runs from the airport, to pick people up, or set up houses for them wherever, because we didn't know or didn't think at that point that we were going to be housing them, because I hadn't heard anything, right? And then late November, have a call from IINE that is, yes, we'd like the space, and there's a family arriving in a week. So, which is just how this is working. It's just how I mean, a week is actually really good. Sometimes they were getting phone calls at 10 a.m. saying, there's a family arriving at 1 p.m. at the airport, be there to pick them up. This is how it was working. So if many of you were involved in that time, sort of preparing things, we had this overwhelming, incredible support from the wider community, donating everything we needed and more. We had to get rid of loads of stuff, right, after preparing the rooms and converting the downstairs space into bedrooms. It was a beautiful thing to see, you know, not just the parish, but the wider community stepping in. And the first family then arrived, and then when the second family was set to arrive, IINE said, can you take more? And we were full, obviously, with 20 people, well, 19 people at the time. And I remembered that a clergy friend, Reverend Becca Bryan, over at the church had said, anything we can do to help, let me know. And a lot of times people say that just to say that, right? You know, it's like, oh, you know. So I called her and I said, well, you said anything you can do to help. More people need space. And they stepped up amazingly, incredible, you know, really passionately, and were ready and sort of on call. And by the end of January, then they had a family of 11 as well. Then we heard from Gulalai, who's here with us, and one of the mothers in the families, that her brother and sister-in-law and their baby were in a military base and about to get sent to Georgia for whatever reason. Normally, they try to keep families together when they can. And the utter chaos of everything that was happening, this wasn't always the case. And so I found myself through getting the phone number and ID picture and, like, you know, residence card and everything of the brother on a military base through a mutual friend of the families who lives in Dorchester, linking International Institute of New England with the U.S. Commission for Refugees and Immigrants to make the transfer of her brother from Georgia to Massachusetts so that the family could be together. And the night before, at about 9 p.m. or something, the night before they were being transferred to Georgia, we found out this got approved. And Central Congregational Church stepped up immediately. It's funny, the pastor there, Chris Nye, said the greatest miracle of this whole thing was that a Congregationalist church did something basically overnight rather than taking 6 years. You know, so that took place, and so the family, Gulalai's brother and sister-in-law and their family now is in an apartment in Newburyport. There's a smaller family of 3, now 4, because they've had another baby as well. Is in an apartment. The family sponsored by West Newbury is in an apartment in Newburyport. And both of those situations are precarious as well. There's initial funding that comes, extra funding that comes when they first arrive, and for the first time, a bit of time, months that they're here, which is helping to offset the costs of rent. And when that goes away, we don't know. They're all working now and everything, but we don't know if they'll be able to meet that. So even those, and that's not just these families here. Like, we're going to have, I think, a second wave of crisis when families all throughout the state, all throughout the country, this initial housing funding stops from the government because it's not enough and it doesn't go on long enough. And people are in apartments that they can't afford on their own because I couldn't afford, most of us in this room could not afford to rent in this area right now, right? Okay, so maybe you have a mortgage with a much smaller payment than what rent would be, but the rent costs are astronomical and going up all the time and everywhere, from Lowell, Lynn, South Boston, here, anywhere. They're astronomical. And so one fear is that all this extra money came in from some federal, and the state of Massachusetts was really good about providing extra funding as well. But unfortunately, I think, rather than finding creative, permanent housing solutions with these millions of dollars that came to support these people, it was all thrown away on rent. And hopefully there won't be another crisis going forward. But that's a bit of a side note. So there are 2 in apartments, 3 still, the 3 largest families still in churches, but even the ones in apartments, that we don't know how sustainable in the long run these apartments they're in will be. When just a bit more of the story, when the families first arrived, someone who works for the Office for Refugees and Immigrants for the state of Massachusetts happens to live in Newburyport. Didn't know at the time. We've become very good friends now. Contacted me and reached out, any way I can help, let me know. And so what we did was form a sort of working group with people. We still meet every other week now. We were meeting every week for the first half a year or more, with people like her who work for the Office for Refugees and Immigrants, someone who works for the Department of Transitional Assistance, who is responsible for benefits and things that they receive, other people who are medics, or mental health specialists, someone from the school system, a professor of English language learning and literature, right, who helped to organize 45 English teachers who give English lessons every day to the adults while the kids are at school, to the kids when they come home. And these lessons are still going now, for all the families at all the churches, not just here. And so we got this group together because we needed people with expertise, right, in different areas. And then we were able to get the kids. The school system has been amazing. I spoke to the director of the Boston office at IINE about this when they first arrived, like what happens with the schools. And they normally register them and take care of that sort of thing, but we knew it was going to take a long time because they were so overworked and swamped. And some school systems, they have the choice of letting people in and then getting them like required immunizations and stuff after they've started. But many do not, and they say you have to have all these things first, and it was going to take 3 to 4 months for all of that to take place. And our school system stepped up and said, no way, that's not going to happen, and so we got them in immediately. And they made new hires in the schools here. They applied for all kinds of extra grant funding and everything they could do to support the children, and almost 30 new kids started within a couple weeks of each other, none of whom speak English, right, all in our school systems, and they were incredible at stepping up. It hasn't been perfect, right, and there have been, mishaps here and there, but overall they've been amazing in their support. And so all this was sort of happening at once, and I realized within days that the idea was we're providing space, right? We're just going to provide the space, and the refugee resettlement agents, the professionals, are going to take care of everything. Someone who was quite involved in this work reached out and got in touch too from the mosque in Andover, and has been a wonderful help. And she came by a couple days after the first family, or the next day maybe, brought some prayer rugs and some things that they might need, which was fantastic. And she asked some questions, and I was like, I'm not really sure, but the case manager from IINE will become, the caseworker will be here to help with some of that. And she laughed and she said, that's you. And I said, no. There's a caseworker who's, with the resettlement agency who's going to be, he'll be around later. We can ask him about that or take care of it. And she just said, sort of laughed. And I found out very soon that she was right, and that there was no way to prepare for this. There was no infrastructure set up, and not just in this parish, but in this city or anywhere around to make this work. And that I was a de facto case manager overnight. And that's been wonderful. And there's a lot more help now, and there's some amazing people in this parish who have stepped up in incredible ways, and they can talk for a few minutes about what they're doing too. It's been an amazing work and exhausting work. And so that happened, and then the community continued to step up in amazing ways. Between us and the Unitarian Church, in the months of December, January, and maybe early February, we raised about $100,000. Just saying, these people are here, can you help? So not only all the in-kind donations, all the bedding, all the clothing, anything else we needed, people just started giving money. And that we're still saving for them. We have an account, and so does FRS, with money that's come in that we've kept for. We've had to use some of it for particular things, but we've kept for their housing, right? Because we know that when they're paying for their housing, they're going to need extra support, and so we have that there. It's been wonderful again to see the community step up. Our mayor is incredibly supportive, really involved, and wants this work to succeed more and more and more, and do all that they can. And we'll talk about some of those potential ways that they can as well. The kids play Newburyport youth soccer and basketball and track and field at the high school, and are really involved in the community and making friends and going to birthday parties with the same ones sort of my kids go to and everything else. It's been incredible to see them flourishing, particularly the girls who couldn't go to school if they were still in Afghanistan with the Taliban. The fathers and older teens are working in local businesses, and there are thousands of people in our community connected to them through the schools or through work or through soccer or through basketball or through track or through wrestling that they're also doing now, some of the kids. The YWCA has given free swim lessons to all of them. They're continuing with those and supporting in other ways as well. The New American Association of Massachusetts out of Lynn really believes in the work that we started doing here, and very early on jumped in. They did some cultural training and help with the schools and ran courses for the teachers and support staff. And they have hired 2 part-time case managers to work just with the Newburyport families, one of whom is from Afghanistan. She's lived in the States for 6 years. She's in Portsmouth, Patmana, who some of you have seen around and met. And so she also speaks the language and works as a translator, which is incredibly helpful because that was very difficult until she arrived to manage. So IINE, the New American Association of Massachusetts, our city, and other nonprofits like the YWCA, John Fee, and the director, has been really amazing in offering anything they can do in support. Local contractors and plumbers put in showers in the church downstairs and at the Unitarian Church for free, no cost, probably $60,000 of work between the 2 churches. It was done for free. And the materials and all were donated as well. Seth Moulton's office. Seth Moulton, our representative in Congress, he is a vet himself from Iraq and Afghanistan, and this is very important and on his heart, and he's been involved. Several members of his staff, but 2 really directly who I've gotten to know well, are very involved, and he himself too has had conversations and interactions with us as we seek federal support on that, and then the state government through the Office for Refugees and Immigrants and others as well, as we look at seeing what we can do at the state level. The families attest to being very happy that with their kids' schooling and being able to settle here, they like Newburyport. It's their community, and they're very grateful to the parish and others, volunteers from outside the parish too, and the community that love and support them. The one thing that remains, of course, is this housing piece, which is the most essential piece, really, to their full sort of resettlement and flourishing and a new life here. And so that's what spending most of my time on is the housing piece, especially since so many other wonderful volunteers. Again, we had no structure, no expectation that we needed to do all of the stuff for general day-to-day support for the families. And then once we realized we needed it, we had no infrastructure at all set up to make that work. When the other two churches were receiving families, I met with leaders who were going to be involved and had long conversations about helping, how the necessity that this is not just going to be providing the space, be prepared, and this is what needs to happen. We didn't have that. We were the guinea pigs who didn't have that sort of chance to set up volunteer support. Since so many wonderful volunteers have stepped up in incredible ways, I've been able to focus a lot more just on the housing side and making that work, which we can talk more about. Before we do, I've been talking too much, and I want to open up to some key volunteers who help to support the families in different ways. You might want to say a few words about their experiences or share a story and speak to the blessing of this work. And then have some time for questions and things and discussion and what's on your mind. And I can talk more specifically about the housing sort of scheme or plans that we're trying to put into effect here. So who were ones that raise your hand if you already said by email that you wanted to say something, but then we can also open it up to others who are, yes, Deirdre, Lisa, Chelsea can say something. Okay, and then anyone else who wants, Annie or Dorothy or anyone else who would like to, who's working more closely with the families can do so as well. So Lisa, do you want to come here and come around too?
Sure. And I didn't prepare for today as much as I should have, but I'll try and be brief and not ramble. Anyway, so when we first started planning, we really had no idea what to expect, and a lot of our conversations in the Global Outreach Committee anyway were about, I would say, about differences. We certainly anticipated that the people coming wouldn't speak our language. Maybe some of them would. Maybe some of them were from urban centers, were highly educated, or, we didn't know. Were they going to be from rural areas? Did they have any English at all? Certainly cultural differences, religious differences. And then when I first got involved, I was very much involved in organizing from a distance. So I was sort of email organizing people, trying to organize drivers and volunteers in general. And it was pretty chaotic. And we had been warned about this. A number of us took training through IINE, and I remember one thing that they emphasized was volunteers need to be flexible. You might find out that you have to drive into Boston at 1 o'clock in the morning to pick up a family. You might find this out at the last minute. That kind of flexibility. And it didn't really sink in until it started happening. And our rector was personal caseworker to 19 people and getting calls at all hours in a language that he may have had some familiarity with, but certainly not in the dialects that they were speaking and not to the extent that was needed. And so we were all sort of struggling in this chaos. But anyway, getting back to, so my own experience as I, in limited ways, became more directly involved with the families, driving kids to school, or driving a mom to the dentist. The similarities started coming through. And as I drove one mom to the dentist, we were just struggling to communicate, not very successfully, but we got a few things, across to each other. But just basic similarity of frustration and trying to communicate with each other was comforting, that we were both feeling that, you know, and she managed to get across a bit of humor that I only had 3 kids and that my 25-year-old son was not married. That was hilarious. But anyway, so we managed to communicate, but the struggle was common. And then in organizing Family Fun Day this past fall, and taking part in that, all of our Afghan families were there, and that was a great experience, just being part of that whole experience with the families. So one thing that happened was, you know, I was like, okay, what music am I going to put on for this event? Because we were just doing canned music. I was doing Pandora. So I picked reggae, and I had it on, and I didn't have Pandora Pro or anything, so, you know, there were ads and stuff, and the kids kept, like, coming over to us and, like, bugging us to come over and do something about the music, and finally, I'm like, okay, what do you want? But, you know, we're trying to communicate, and I finally realized they wanted to choose the music. So I said, great, okay, so we figured it out, and they chose the music, and it was fantastic. It was perfect for the event, and the rest of the day was history. It was great. But as I stood there watching the kids play in the bouncy house, all different, I mean, teens and the little guys, you know, and watching the older kids take care of the 4-year-old and watching them compete and have fun. I mean, it just reminded me so much of family events of my own as a kid, or watching my own teenagers interact with younger kids or interact with each other, pick their own music. And it made me really realize, for all the differences, what the real gift is, standing there realizing that we all keep having these same familial experiences over and over again through the ages, across cultures. We're all the same. And that was a real gift to me, to feel like I was part of this greater family, and we were all part of it together. So there have been some frustrating times, I'm sure Father Jared would agree, but it all has been quite a gift and rewarding, and I guess that's all I have to say.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Lisa. Deirdre, do you? And the other thing I should say is that the way that we have it set up now is that there are people focusing on different things, right? And so Deirdre and Lainey Ives, who can't be here today, are helping to organize kids stuff, like outside of school, kids activities and things like that. There's a medical team of Mary Candela and Chelsea and Eden Beams. Eden's a doctor, and Chelsea and Mary are nurses who are helping with their medical needs. Someone called Mary McCormick from outside the parish is handling dental stuff and those appointments and arranging that and rides for those things and all of that. Annie helps a lot with day-to-day stuff and shopping needs and being attentive to whatever they might need and helping to either arrange that, caring for a lot of it herself, or finding other rides and things like that. And Lisa, as she said, is helping to coordinate, drivers and people like that as well. And I think that's all the sort of main categories, right? But children's stuff, Deirdre is helping.
Great. So as Father Jared said, Lainey Ives and I have had the privilege and honestly the fun of organizing all of the children's activities outside of school. So soccer, basketball, birthday parties. And I think, what I would say about that is, and many, many, many people have volunteered. We have created a sign-up genius is what we've done. But what I would say is the people who have been driving on a pretty consistent basis, as Lisa said, I think it does give you the opportunity to personally connect with some of these family members. And I'm just going to share a few quick stories, but Bronson, for pretty much the entire soccer season, was driving 2 of the boys. So he was driving them every week. And one week he got sick, and I said I would drive them. So I came to pick them up, and I said, you know, boys, I'm sorry, Bronson's sick. I'll be driving you. And the boys do not talk nearly as much as the girls. The girls talk nonstop in the car, but the boys are kind of quiet. And one of the boys said to me, "You are good, but Bronson is so, so, so good." So I said, "Bronson, you need to come back, because apparently I am not as good as you are." You know, and with the girls, I've been mostly driving the girls to soccer and to basketball. And one night I was driving them, and Lainey and I had been talking that they're very struck by decorations in Newburyport, Halloween decorations and now holiday decorations. And one of the girls said, "So, you wear the clothes, you get the candy." And I said, "Yes, on Halloween you wear costumes, you get candy." And she said, "Can you find me the clothes?" So we were able to talk with the parents and find out if Pop Mana found out if it was even appropriate to take them trick-or-treating, which they said it was. And Lainey worked with the River Valley Charter School, and we had about 100 costumes donated, which was amazing. And we brought them all into the library, and Annabella, she came and helped, and we all just, for like 2 hours, kids tried on costumes. And you know, I think things like that normalize what does it mean to be a kid, right? Like, it's fun to kick a ball around, or it's fun to put on costumes. And so I would just say to anybody, oh, one more story. So this weekend, I don't usually do this, but this week I drove 2 people to the dentist. And I came out with the daughter. We were waiting for the son and dad to come out. And I said, how was the dentist? Do you like the dentist? And she said, "I like the person, I don't like the job." And I said, well, that is America for you, honey. None of us like going to the dentist. Yeah, so I feel like, you know, if I sort of challenge people, if you have the opportunity, whether it's to drive or be at an event, really, it's amazing to just be able to get to know, and not just children. I'm drawn to children. You know, I would always choose, you're all lovely. But I would always choose Elspeth over all the rest of you. But, you know, I think that the kids especially, their language is incredible. What they have learned in a year is incredible. It takes a little more coaxing to get the boys to talk, but I really think I would challenge any of you who have the time to sign up, you know, to drive to one basketball game or one soccer game or one birthday party. The girls yesterday said to me, "You love the sports." And I thought, if they only knew that I am the least sporty person in the whole world. I'm like, no, I really like the theater and the music, but I'm attending a lot of basketball games. So I think, you know, that's just been a real blessing. Really great. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Sandra. Do you want to? Yeah.
Deirdre, that was amazing. I feel like that put everything into such a great picture of kind of what we've been doing and experiencing in the last year since our families have arrived. I am on a medical team, so we look after all 20 family members downstairs. You would think 20 physicals alone is quite the job, but there's a lot more appointments and things on top of that. We kind of help them navigate the American healthcare system and talk through their choices and decisions when it comes to their healthcare. So it's quite a big job, and we see them very often. I'm probably downstairs with our families multiple times throughout the week, and we've really grown and grown very close because of that. I was fortunate enough to be Gulalai's support person as baby Nadia was born. So I was there the moment she took her first breath. And I've now endearingly been dubbed her grandmother. So I never would have thought at my age I'd be a grandmother, but I am. So it's really been such a blessing to get to know them on such a deeper level. they've brought me into their home. They've brought me into their lives. They've shared their hopes and dreams. They've shared their trauma. It's opened up my eyes so much to the world, to so many different things. And it's just such a blessing to be able to be with them and get to know them and be a part of their lives.
Thanks. Does anyone else want to? Yeah, Annie.
I don't know where to begin, so I'll just limit it to 2 issues. But everybody deserves, the volunteers, amazing. The amazing work they're doing is incredible. But the medical team in particular, you have no idea what they go through to schedule an appointment. You know, if a lot of the established medical offices have translator capabilities and they pick up the phone and they can work. But you've got to get a driver, you've got to get, the parent may have to come with the child. If the office doesn't offer translating abilities, they have to make sure that Papmana is available to call in. So it's a tremendous amount of work. So it's just amazing. I'm just very, very impressed with how much they've been able to accomplish with 20 people. Every Monday, there's a meeting that Sheila Treef helps organize for all the women, and they come together and they have the ability to talk and just about good things and sad things and family that's still in Afghanistan. So I've been able to go to 1 or 2 as time permits. So they decide to invite Leslie Hensley to talk about creating a woman's craft program. And I sat there at that meeting, and this woman is really assertive, and she goes, I'm going to teach you how to sew, I'm going to teach you business terminology, and we're going to start a business. And we're going to meet for 3 hours a week. I'm sitting there like, I'm just amazed. And she's pulled it off. And I tried to go to the craft show yesterday, but the traffic was so bad that I finally gave up. But Ann Tuthill told me it was amazing success for what they sold. And the women now have bank accounts where money is going in to support their families. So it's really exciting. Thank you.
Thanks, Annie. Yeah, that's great. Thanks for mentioning the women's group as well that Sheila is leading has been remarkable. Sheila, of course, is she's a member of this parish, loosely affiliated sort of member for many years, I think now. And but she is a trauma specialist, counselor, therapist. She started a group with the women, and they are able to open up about their joys and sorrows and wounds and trauma, and have really developed closer relationships with one another and learned to rely on one another through it. And then also, this women's micro business has opened up in incredible ways. And I don't know if you've gone to any of the craft fairs that they've done, but they've created beautiful things, and they've just only, just started, only just begun. I know Dorothy's helping with some of the financial stuff with women here too, and their Venmo accounts and their bank accounts, and how to prepare for taxes and handle everything as they get their businesses going. But it's brilliant work. And Leslie, whom Annie mentioned, is working with the New American Association of Massachusetts, NAM, as it's called, who is also providing the case management and translation and things. So really amazing organization who's working with us. The big issue going forward, well, the whole time that they've been here, the biggest issue, but and most pressing thing, of course, again, is that permanent housing piece. And it's the most difficult. Housing for these families doesn't exist. That's the bottom line. It doesn't exist, right? It's not a matter of like going down to sort of, a real estate office and finding something like what, it doesn't exist. And so, and unfortunately, our government and rightfully so, and for their own safety, took these people from their homes, evacuated them, right? They didn't set off on some journey to find a different land, right? Or whatever sort of, one-sided, American perspective stories that we have of these things, right? They were taken from their homes. They had homes, right, and families, and lives and jobs were taken from them, evacuated and brought here. But unfortunately, which again was the thing that needed to happen for their safety, but then unfortunately there wasn't enough follow through with actually providing for them when they got here. Receive a small initial refugee payment, which is meant to cover sort of deposit and first month's rent or something like that, right? But isn't really enough to be sustainable. They have cash benefit, and they're eligible for cash benefit and food stamps each month, which helps, but obviously isn't enough to live on. And then they get jobs, of course, and they're incredibly hard workers. But supporting families of this size, as you can imagine, could you support on your salary or whatever a family of 11? Probably not. And so it's difficult, right? And so there's been a lot of different avenues and things that we've been trying to work out. And ultimately what we came down to is that we need to have creative solutions, right, to make sense of this thing, because they don't exist. We're radically unprepared for the situation that we're in now as a nation and a world, and we're radically, radically unprepared for what's coming in the future. There are 100 million forcibly displaced persons in the world right now. That's 1 in every 78 people. Next year, as opposed to this year, of what happened in 2022 for forcibly displaced people, is expected increase of 36%. And now, on top of war and oppression and discrimination and famine and all kinds of, political reasons, everything you can think of that creates refugees and forcibly displaced persons, now with climate change, some estimates are as high as that by 2050 there will be 1.2 billion climate refugees. So moving from 1 in 78 persons to 1 in 7, about, on the planet. There are no specific housing solutions in existence, really, for any of this. The funding solutions and the programs that our government provides for refugees and asylum seekers hasn't changed since about 1991, right? The world has changed, right? But the way this is funded, the way it's supported, hasn't. And again, as I said, the previous administration gutted it all anyway and closed it all down, essentially. We're radically unprepared, right? And it takes communities like this stepping up in incredible ways to make sense of this and support what's happening. The housing solution is, of course, a whole nother level. And, there's no way that just like church communities or even larger communities, cities and towns, can make that work fully. We can't do all the good in the world, unfortunately. We can't transform every problem. We can't meet everyone's needs. What we can do is the good that is right in front of us. And indeed, if we don't do the good that is right in front of us, we will never, ever, ever, ever do anything good at all in our lives, right? The opportunities in front of us for these 5 families is the good that we have to offer and the good that we have to do. So that's what we're seeking to do. But we're hoping that the solutions that we create here and the ideas that we have been generating and dealing with other nonprofits and government agencies and everyone else will have an impact and influence in the larger scheme of things as well, things that can be repeatable and done elsewhere. early on, we thought maybe after being housed temporarily here, that moving on to other communities that are presumptively less expensive or whatever, easier to settle into, would be the way to go. But resettlement agencies and things have been explicitly stating how communities like ours, like Ipswich, other places around that have been doing this work as well, are essential and necessary going forward for resettling refugees. You can't drop 2,500 people in the same neighborhood overnight, right? Not only housing stock, but the employment, the school systems, nothing can support that, right? And so this sort of greater moving out from communities like Boston and Lowell and Lynn, who have done some of this work before, has become absolutely essential and will be more so going forward in the future. The other problem sort of with that is, honestly, rent is going up everywhere so much that there's not a real difference. So, I mean, you can purchase a home in Pittsfield or something, or maybe Lawrence or something for cheaper than you can in Newburyport. But rent is too expensive everywhere. And so there really just aren't sort of clear paths, obvious paths forward. So what we've been looking to do is the overall plan we'd like to achieve, and that we're working with lots of different people to do, is to acquire properties and earmark them in perpetuity for refugee resettlement. So to help these 5 families here, and then hopefully others 50 years from now, 100 years from now, whatever, establishing long-term permanent solutions, because again, those long-term permanent solutions don't exist. The best way and the most hopeful way forward is a public-private partnership. Been working with the YWCA the best way would just be public and the government do what they're supposed to do, right, and provide for the people that they brought here. But that's not holistically, but that holistic provision isn't going to happen. So the YWCA down the road has an affordable housing program that we have been talking to and seeking to work with, who could then manage the properties, because I or this parish or other clergy and parishes or other people working aren't looking to become landlords for these refugee resettlement properties. So the idea would be acquire properties through this affordable housing, private affordable housing program, which could be earmarked in perpetuity for refugee resettlement. Also talking with, there's been some work with the Affordable Housing Trust here and a potential grant to help purchase at least the first property, as well as the fundraising that we've done and some equity that this affordable housing program could put in. The public piece would then be, it could be anything, creating new programs, but what we're proposing is a project-based Section 8 on these properties. So Section 8 housing, which you may be familiar with, is typically what we call personal choice vouchers. And someone has a Section 8 voucher that moves around with them wherever they live, and they pay about 1/3 of their income toward rent, and the rest of the rent is covered by the program, by the government-funded program, through HUD federally, but administered locally through local housing authorities. The average wait time typically around here for a personal choice voucher for Section 8 is about 12 years. So can be sooner. It depends on, there are different factors, right? Like someone who is unhoused, right, experiencing homelessness would be moved up the list, or these kinds of things, right? But 10 to 12 years is what we're looks at around here. So another option, something that does exist, is what's called project-based, which means that the Section 8 benefits would be placed on the property itself, so that whoever lives in it gets the benefits of Section 8 without waiting 12 years for a personal voucher. Now, if they move somewhere else, they would then lose those benefits, right? But living in these properties would provide that benefit for them. This does a couple things. For one, it doesn't have the long wait time. It could be just done if the property is there, which would also allow us to purchase properties only just with a down payment, right? Because it doesn't matter how big the mortgage would be, because whoever's living in the house would only pay a third of their income toward the rent, and the government would be able to pay the rest. So that's one benefit. The other benefit is it takes it out of that pool of, it's a heinous way of putting it, but it's what the world that we live in that we've created, this pool of competition of human beings with other human beings for the benefits that are human rights, which all should be receiving, like shelter and food, right? So, and which is obviously good for these people. They don't have to wait, say a dozen years to receive the benefits they need. But it's also good for those on the list, right? What happens when hundreds of thousands of people every year are added to this already long wait list coming into the country? All of a sudden 12 years becomes 19 years, right? That hurts everyone. Not having particular solutions for particular circumstances and continually trying to shove square pegs into round holes hurts everyone. Hurts everyone, right? And an already cracking and crumbling system that's overstretched beyond its limits will just entirely explode. But unfortunately, again, I think certainly the federal government has been so short-sighted on this that there's really nothing in place, to make sense of it. And so what this would enable us to do is to create a way forward, which could provide for not only for these families, but others in the future in our area, but also something that could be repeatable elsewhere if this government piece can be worked out. Now, I'm not hopeful, actually, so conversations with HUD have not been extremely fruitful. Well, they're fruitful in this, that people say, this is a wonderful idea, we should take it to Congress, to which we just, what is that going to be, 12 years till anything happen, or if anything does happen. And so we're looking at working it more at the state level as well, perhaps creating something for the state of Massachusetts. We have a lot of players in this who believe in it, who hopefully could move something forward, but it might take time for that sort of government piece. The problem with the Section 8 system is that even if we create this separate project-based category for refugees, the pot of money is still the same. So HUD needs to put more money into it, right, and then earmark it. Not just earmark this possibility, because then that pool of money that still is taking 12 years to get to people, right, will be even shrunk even more if we're taking some of it. So we need new routes, we need new doors, and this is what we keep communicating to government entities, that you just have to create it, whether it's Section 88, Section 9, whatever, I don't care, like something has to happen here. The other route, of course, is, well, not waiting for government entities to move and just raising a bunch of money and purchasing properties outright, right? I don't mean the parish raising that money, but there's a group of us working on the housing piece from different places throughout the community, right? And so working with some fundraising experts and others to strategize about how to do this best. We could raise $3.5 million and buy 5 homes, and there you go. The third route is there are a few residential lots in the city that are owned by the government, by the city government. And they're already residential lots. These aren't, commercial lots or whatever. They've just never been built on. And they've been surrendered to the city over the past however many years of people just never paid taxes on them, forgot about them, whatever. City now owns them, and they can dispossess these properties for us to build on. And a contractor working on particular plans for a specific lot right now in this city, and if we can do a bit of community organizing and get some influence on city councilors to make the vote to dispossess property, can build a house for a few $100,000 and have a 6-bedroom house built for one of the families. There is another potential lot which could also be used, and then a set of lots as well, which needs a delineation on the property to see if they can be used because they're surrounded by wetland areas. But, best case scenario, could have 5 lots. and to build properties very, very cheaply, because you don't have to pay $400,000 or $500,000 for the lot, right? The lot is free. And so that would be best case scenario. And then these houses would be earmarked in perpetuity for incoming refugees, for these families, and then if and when they move out of them, for others. And so that's sort of the best, certainly the most inexpensive route. 1 second, and we'll get to your question, Sue. In the meantime, the situation at the Unitarian Church is much better. They have a parish house right next to the church, where they live. It's essentially like a house, right? And it's one family. Here in our basement, having 20 people, 2 families, living in such close quarters together for this long is obviously not ideal for anyone. They're very grateful to have the space and to be safe, and their kids to be safe in this, and cared for so well by so many people here. But there are understandably tensions and difficulties with just making that work, right? I mean, 20 people living in the church basement. And so whatever route that we're looking at for the permanent solutions, we're also looking for temporary ones. To move out at least, even if it was like a winter rental or something for the next, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months for one of the families while we found solutions for both of them, that would just create such a better atmosphere for living. So we've been pursuing that as well. And so, well, if you know of any winter rentals or anything like that. And the thing about that is, because they have money from the government that they've saved, we have money that we've raised, even if it's if it's too expensive of something for them to live in permanently, we can supplement the rent for, say, 6 months or whatever, while we find, something permanent to get them out of the basement situation and into a proper home, while we find something more permanent. So that's the sort of part of the strategy that we're looking at now for these 2 families in particular. Though the family at the Unitarian Church, it's an easier situation. The sort of temporary stopgap isn't as necessary for them. Did you have something to? Yeah, no, so that's obvious thought to think of. So Sue brought up Habitat for Humanity, and if that's began conversations with them in early January, which I'm not going to go into details, but were extremely promising at one point, and then weren't. And we'll just leave it at that. One of the frustrating things about all of this, too, has been how when doors open, 3 more shut, and you have to find new routes around. And there have been so many avenues. I mean, literally, just countless, hundreds of avenues that have been attempted that have made some progress and then just slam shut. Through other nonprofits, like this, with government entities, and we just have to keep going. It's sort of 3 steps forward and 4 or 5 steps back, over and over and over again. And of course, it's only on other people's minds. It's on my mind all the time, and some others involved all the time. It's only on other people's minds when you're putting it in their mind, and which is obviously another frustration, right? And having to be constant agitator. Right, constant advocate, saying, don't forget about this, let's think about this more, let's meet, let's get to, this, do this. And so most weeks I'm meeting with people from, cities and or state and or federal government, a couple nonprofits, individuals in the community that could be influential in doing different things. Our sort of group working on sort of housing and fundraising, or a separate working group, or other volunteers, all at once, sort of like, throughout any given week. and then calling people with potential opportunities. Oh, here you have a winter rental, or you might have this, or going to see places, or doing, you know, and so it's sort of constant. Any possible door. I mean, I was on a call this past week. I've been on calls with people from the Maine governor's office. I don't know. And then an organization who works in New Hampshire and Maine, but not in Massachusetts, just to see what they're doing and how we can, you know, so it's like any sort of, you know, possible sort of avenue. And then again with Seth, someone from Seth Moulton's office talking about, you know, sort of aspects of how we might be able to mimic these things that I've been talking to other people, and Vermont as well, about what we could do here, you know. So it's just, you know, I don't know, if you have a tip from Hawaii, I'll call them, right? You know, to learn and find out what, you know, what might be possible. So, you know, literally every avenue is sort of, you know, but that's where we are. What about any other thoughts or questions about any of this? I know one of the, you know, the things that's on people's minds is has been, you know, this obviously the living situation in our basement has gone longer than we thought. You know, is that sort of, you know, forever, or when is the sort of end of this? The answer, of course, to that is no. That's not good for them. All right, it's not even that, regardless of anything about the parish, it's not good for them. And so, as I said, we're looking for the fastest solutions out, even if it's another temporary solution, right, as a stopgap before getting to the permanent one, or even if it's a couple temporary solutions and different short-term rentals or something before the permanent piece. And so, so that's certainly in the works, and certainly our top concern is getting them out into a more stable living situation. With that comes promise. You know, we hope to, you know, continue. Obviously, we've developed very close relationships to continue working, you know, with, I hope that sort of refugee resettlement work on some, not housing them in the basement necessarily, but on some level will like always continue, like with this parish, right? You know, just this is sort of part of who we are now, and it's beautiful and wonderful, and how can we continue to contribute? But once we sort of shift the families into homes, possibilities can be endless going forward on sort of, we can have an opportunity to cast vision and think about, you know, how we continue to support them, right, in their lives in different ways and less immediate and intense ways, but still being with them, and you know, continue this much needed and beautiful work in new ways. Anything we haven't covered or thought about? Yeah.
This really has little to do with the Afghan refugees.
That's on too, if you want to grab it.
I don't know how many of you were able to attend that wonderful service Friday evening, Jared's institution. And I just wanted to welcome you, Jared, formally.
Yeah,
As our new rector. I'm sure you'll settle into the job very quickly.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Bob. Yeah, it's you know, 2.5 years. It feels sometimes it feels like yesterday and still setting in. Sometimes it feels like I've been here 20 years. You know, depending on the day and what's going on. So it's, you know, for this, yeah.
So, how about integration into jobs?
Yeah.
Into,
Yeah.
self-sustainability?
Yeah.
And that sort of, because that would seem to me like, I know it's important to have a place for them to live.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, teach me to fish. You're a lot better off.
Yeah, so Lee's talking about, you know, sustainability, jobs, and all of that. Yeah, so no, obviously the whole resettlement, how everything's set up, right, is leaning towards that. Housing is a very important part of that, right? So, so that's and the most crucial and difficult part in our particular situation here, with the ridiculous housing market, the ridiculous rental market, and the large size of the families, right? So, but no, yeah, that is the whole sort of mission, right? Is that self-sufficiency and stability. That's why so much focus on English language learning and education, you know, for kids. That's why, you know, again, all of the adults now have jobs, and older teens have jobs. and are earning money, like, decent wages, and really getting integrated into the community in all sorts of ways, particularly through the kids and, the friends that they're making. All of that is going along very successfully. Very successfully. I mean, really promising stuff. That the housing piece, the reason I'm talking about that so much is that that's the piece that's left to really, make it be the real game changer in there. And people have to understand too, like with resettlement. I mean, so some people quite early on, 4 or 5 months after they arrive, ask questions about, well, when are they going to be completely self-reliant or whatever? And I think it betrays a bit of American exceptionalism and ignorance, right? In some ways, when we start talking about this. Not your question, Leah. It's a very obviously legitimate question. Talking about some other people have. No. But some people have. Well, why don't they just, sort of pull themselves up by them bootstraps and not need any benefits and do everything, which obviously you're not doing. I'm just saying, but some, and like I think so. I've lived personally in twice in different countries. So I lived in 5 countries, and 2 of them non-English speaking, in which I didn't speak the language when I arrived. One of them I read the language, one of them I didn't read or speak. And so the one I read I didn't really speak well, but I had to sort of learn that. It's incredibly isolating, incredibly difficult. Not to mention, we don't have an official language here. So you can take a citizenship test in Mandarin or something, right, and become a U.S. citizen because we don't have an. If you're in England, France, Germany, Italy, they have official languages, right? So if you move to France tomorrow and you don't speak level B1 European ranked language, which is a high intermediate language of French, you cannot work. So for us as Americans to think, oh, I would move somewhere and just settle in a month and be perfectly fine, to have all these resources and money, look at I'm highly educated, I can do anything, I can pull myself up by my bootstraps, is just incredibly ignorant of how the world works. Actually, if you moved there, you would not be allowed to work or be hired, right? So, if you didn't have independent resources or other money saved or whatever, you could not survive and would be homeless, right? No matter where you come from, no matter how highly educated you are, or whatever. And so, the fact that they're all here and have jobs and increasing their language abilities and settling into the community and in many different ways, and being incredibly resourceful too, not just have jobs, like for the women, for instance. So the men have jobs at Anna Jake's, with local contractors, painters, or at learning in an automotive place, learning, be a mechanic, or at the welding facility. Another father has a job at the welding facility over in the industrial park, right? So all of these things, and the older teens working too. But the women they're literally like entrepreneurs creating their own business. I mean, it's extraordinary. And so I think that when if you just sort of step back and shift your perspective a little bit on this, we can see how, extraordinary their journey of resettlement is. A couple of days ago, so if you remember back in January, if you were with us then, and some of you are new since then, NPR did an interview with one of the families here, and they just did a follow-up one on Thursday, in which, by the way, 2 of the girls, Banafsha and Hadia, interviewed entirely in English. But one of the older boys said how much they love the high school and are making friends and settling in, how great they know their family's safe here and what that means to them. But I don't feel like I've actually arrived in America yet. That I'm in a sort of limbo period between, lived in a Qatar military base, German military base, a U.S. military base, and then the basement of a church. And he has arrived in some ways, but also maybe hasn't fully arrived yet, right? And that sort of instability and, is a big piece of it, of that having a home is just this huge piece of that resettlement and of that full self-sufficiency and all of that. And so that's a big thing. Yeah. And that second NPR thing will come out probably in, I think they said January or something, so we'll have to let the parish know when that's happening.
I know that one of the needs right now, we're looking for cars, right?
Yeah.
So if anybody knows of any like used cars that are, could be,
Yeah.
that's a, somebody, one of the older boys, the teenage boys has gotten a driver's permit and was just starting to take driving lessons. So the next thing coming up is we need a car.
Yeah.
So if you know of any used cars,
And best case scenario, huge vans, but maybe even if it's just a car, would be better than nothing. But yeah, so yeah, Stu was just saying it's a really good point. So there, different needs coming up. One is, vehicles. I mean, as they are getting licenses and are, some of them are close to having their license and beginning to drive, which will really change. They take the bus, they use the bus system here, they get rides from people for certain things, but when they have vehicles, it's going to really change, their ability to live as well.
at Market Basket ride their bikes.
Yeah,
Getting kind of cold for riding your bike.
yeah. And they'll be able to take the bus that runs right to, to their workplace in Market Basket too. But yeah, the vehicle will make everything better, I think. Any other thoughts or questions, things that we didn't address or that were on your mind about anything? Dorothy.
You may have said this already at other sessions, but have we been able to tap into whether through the diocese or through the people you've formed friendships with now and all the work you're doing throughout Massachusetts, how have any other families as large as ours had some success in their permanent housing at all? Or is it really as bleak as we all think it is and that
Yeah.
there's just nothing?
It really is as bleak as we think it is. So I don't know of other families actually this large. There was going to be a family of 13 coming to Massachusetts as well. It was actually the family that was first going to be housed here. But they ended up going to another state. And talking with state officials and people in the resettlement agencies and at the state level Office for Refugees and Immigrants, no, the answer is there's just not. It's not. And like I said, there's still, there were, a couple weeks ago, I was speaking to someone and they informed me that there were 60 Haitians living in the ER in Boston, refugees, because there's nowhere for them to go and they know that they can stay there overnight. So hotels have been used, for months on end. All the Afghans, I think, are now officially out of hotels into some sort of, whether it's temporary or permanent housing, but even that just happened. And there are others now, so Venezuelans, Haitians, and other Syrians or whatever who have had to come in those situations also. Ukrainians, so.
I keep going, I don't know if this, I brought up to you a long time ago about the Seaview place up in Rowley.
Yes, yeah.
Did you ever look into that? I mean, I haven't done.
No, I couldn't find any other information about that. But if you shoot me an email, I'll look deeper into it.
Maybe buy it, but it's closed with this big barrier. It's this gorgeous man. It's
Yeah, yeah.
and it would house so many. Where is it? In Rowley. See, it used to be a nursing home. My mom lived there. It's a beautiful building. And it has a huge lot of land, so there'd be plenty of room for people. But
Yeah.
I have no idea if that's something that they could look into purchasing through that little plan you were saying. So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, shoot me an email with the exact name of the place and all of that, and
Just something else to.
Yeah.
It's just a big building. That's
Yeah.
I'm thinking. It has lots of bedrooms and a big kitchen and.
yeah. So, yeah, I think it would need to be, something like that would need some work and renovation to make into permanent housing, or not one shared kitchen for everyone, but like separate units, and stuff. But it's, that kind of thing isn't beyond the possibility. There's, of course, old buildings and stuff in Newburyport, too, which have just been a no-go as far as everything that's tied up with them. You know, everyone brings up the Brown School immediately, but it's going to be years before they ever figure out what the heck they're going to do with that. There's so much. I mean, it's just ridiculous, you know. Yeah, but it's worth looking into the things anyway, even though they're very complicated situations. Anything else? Let's end it here. Okay, let us pray. Oh yeah, one more thing, Lee.
So, being fairly new to the parish,
Yeah.
it's, the families are 10 and 10, 2 adults and the rest are the kids, or?
9 and 11, yeah, but two, yeah, the parents and kids, that's it, yeah.
Okay, not multi-generational.
No. Yeah, parents and kids. Good. Well, let's close in prayer and we'll go forward. Let us pray. Almighty God, when we were far off, you sent our Savior to redeem us and draw us near. May we always welcome, befriend, and care for the vulnerable, far off, and stranger, as we seek the hospitality of Christ in our lives and in our community. We pray for the flourishing of those among us who have come from Afghanistan, and that we might continue to be able to meet their needs with joy and blessing in any way that we are able. We make our prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. Thanks, everyone.